Good evening and welcome to Armageddon Live, Series 2, Episode 24. Daniel 2 and 7, Parallels, Part 2, on this 12th of May, 2020. I'm your host, Daniel Decrypted. Well, I hope that was loud enough since, as you saw, I just pulled over the microphone. Anyway, let me get myself out of the way. Alright, part 2. So you'll recall yesterday's study. I believe that's episode 20. What did I just say? Yeah, episode 23. I'll put it in the link below in the description. Put the link in the description. So anyway, you recall yesterday's episode. We showed that Daniel 2 and 7 are parallel. So here's the first 4 kingdoms. And here, of course, is the 4th kingdom in its united and divided phase, and the final 5th kingdom, God's kingdom. So recall, of course, that metals and beasts represent the state. Let me get out of the way. Well, anyway. And non-metals and human represent the church. And we said that one easy way of seeing that, well, for one thing, according to Daniel 7, the 4 kingdoms are the 4 kingdoms are described as coming out of the earth, right? So they're earthly things. And of course, the 5th kingdom is called the kingdom of God. So there's that. But we ended up asking the question, does the clay and the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking, do they really represent the church? How do we know? Can we be really sure? I mean, we're sure about the 5th kingdom, but how can we know? Alright, so let's go on then. But now, O Lord, thou art our Father, we are the clay, and thou art potter, and we all are the work of thy hand. Isaiah 64:8. So here, God definitely, yes, the Bible definitely describes clay as being representing God's people. He is the one who shapes us, makes us into what He would have us to be. Alright, so that. Now, eyes and a mouth. Are they really God's people, the church? So this takes 2 steps to show this. First, eyes and a mouth, a prophet. Before time in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, thus he spake, Come and let us go to the seer. For he that is now called a prophet was before time called a seer. 1 Samuel 9:9. So I think you can see how seer, one who sees, is a prophet, okay? What about mouth? Aaron shall be thy spokesman unto the people. He shall be to thee instead of a mouth, and thou shalt be to him instead of God. I have made thee, that's Exodus 4:16. I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. Exodus 7:1. So here we see that spokesman, mouth, prophet are all equivalent. Aaron is being described as these, and Moses is being called the God, and Aaron is his prophet, or spokesman, or mouth. Alright, so indeed, eyes and a mouth do represent a prophet, seer, and spokesman. But how do we know a prophet is God's people? Well, let's take the example of Jonah. Jonah was sent to Nineveh. He saw a coming destruction, and he was to speak for God to the people. But is not the church the possessor of God's oracles? Do we not see a coming destruction also? And are we not supposed to speak to the world for God? So indeed, if Jonah is a typical example of what a prophet is supposed to be, then indeed the church is supposed to be a prophet. I mean, this, for example, the prophecies that we're going through right now, this is not only for the church, but it is for the world, so the world will know that Christ is on his way and that they need to prepare, they need to get ready. Alright, so now it says in Daniel, "And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay." Daniel 2:41. So what this actually is describing is it's describing the fall of the church. You'll notice that it starts out as being part potter's clay and part iron. But at the end of the verse, it's iron mixed with miry clay. So the first part implies that they're somehow separate. But when they mix, it changes from potter's clay to miry clay. Now you might doubt, or you might say, is miry clay really a bad thing? Well, we know potter's clay is used for making pots, something very useful. But what about miry clay? "He brought me up also out of an horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock, and established my goings." Psalm 42. So here we have David talking about how God has brought him out of a miry pit. Out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay. The fact that God has brought David out of this situation implies that that situation is not a good situation. In fact, you can sort of see that miry clay is clay in which it's got too much dirt in it. And when it has too much dirt in it, essentially all you have is mud then. And you can't really make pots with mud. It's just, the only thing it's good for is mud pies. Now the interesting thing is that there's this transition in the clay, but this transition also occurs because of the parallel nature. It also is implied that it occurs in the transformation of the horn too, which means initially there was a little horn, and there were eyes of a man and a mouth speaking for the Most High, but then they got stuck together. A little horn with eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great words against the Most High. So once again we see this sort of transformation. A mouth speaking for God to a mouth speaking against God. And as I said, we know that this is there because of the parallel nature that we've seen up until this point that exists between Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. One interesting thing to point out about this transition is the iron. Note that the iron remains unchanged in the above interaction. In other words, it is not the iron or horn producing the change in the clay, or eyes and mouth. Alright. Now, it's the one thing to show all these parallels and everything, but prophecy means nothing to us unless it's founded in history. So here's our four kingdoms, and here's the historical kingdoms that they represent. Now we know that this is the kingdoms it represents because it's found, or this sequence is established in Daniel 2:37 and 38. In that verse, Daniel says to King Nebuchadnezzar, a king or the greatest king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, he says, "Thou art this head of gold." And then he says, "And after thee shall come another kingdom." So Daniel is not just saying that Nebuchadnezzar is the golden head, but his entire kingdom is the golden head, and because he is the greatest king in that kingdom, he can represent it. Anyway, so if we follow this sequence down, we know that Babylon is actually known to history as the Neo-Babylonian Empire. It went from 626 to 539 BC. We know that it fell to the Medes and Persians under Cyrus the Great. The Medes and Persians, this kingdom is actually mentioned in Daniel 5:30 and 31, and in 6:8. This chapter 5 talks about the fall of Babylon, and chapter 6 is the replacement of Babylon with the Medes and Persians. But then we have in 8:20 and 11:2, these are prophecies, and in these prophecies it mentions the Medes and Persians. Historically, they were known as the Achaemenid Empire, 550 to 330 BC. We know historically they were followed by Greece under the empires of Alexander the Great and his successors, 330 to 31 BC. Daniel actually mentions these in prophecies in Daniel 8:21 and 22 and 11:2 through 4. Our fourth kingdom is not mentioned in Daniel, and that of course is because the Israelites, the Jews, had not come into contact with Rome at that time. But of course, from history, we know that Rome replaced Greece, or replaced the empires of Alexander the Great and his successors. Historically, it's the Roman Republic, 509 to 27 BC, and the Roman Empire, 27 BC to 476 AD. However, Kingdom 4 has a united and a divided phase. That's the pagan phase. That's the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. The divided phase, also known as the papal Rome, historically is divided Europe, 476 AD to present. Now you might wonder why we call it the papal phase. Well, it's very simple. Let's take a closer look at the feet. You recall, of course, that iron is Rome. So these legs here, of course, are pagan Rome. But in the feet, we add clay to the iron. And we saw that clay represents the church. Okay, so then it jumps out. Iron mixed with miry clay is Rome plus church, or the Roman Church. And it's pretty hard to actually fight this definition, or this thing that jumps out of here, because you'll recall that metal represents state and non-metal represents church. And So this truth cannot be denied, as it is the only church, that is the Roman Church, is the only church that is a mix of non-metal and metal. A church and a state, right? There are no other churches that are nations or states. We don't have the nation of, or this, we don't have the Baptist nation or something like that, or the evangelical nation, or, right? In all other cases, a church is not a state. It's only in the case of the Catholic Church that it is both a church and a state. So according to prophecy then, Rome is the fallen church of Bible prophecy. I don't know what else to say. I hope it's pretty clear from the discussion we've gone through, the verses we've looked at for clay and eyes and a mouth and this idea of the fallen church, the fact that the clay goes from potter's clay to miry clay. I mean, Daniel 2 is the only one that really brings that out, but because of the parallel nature, we know it had to have happened also in the vision of Daniel 7, even though it doesn't mention it. So we get this idea that we started out with pure potter's clay, but then it turned into miry clay. It went from something useful that you could use to make pots to something that was mud, not useful for anything. And then, of course, it jumps out then. When you mix iron with clay, that's Rome, the Roman kingdom being mixed with the church. And so, I mean, it doesn't allow you to interpret it any other way other than Roman church. And so, anyway, I hope this made sense to you. I'm sorry if I was jumping or not doing it as smoothly as maybe I've done in the past. I guess it was a little unprepared. Anyway, I hope this was informative for you. I hope it piqued your interest. And I hope I'll see you again tomorrow. God bless. And bye for now.